The worst U.S. president of the 21st century has returned. Former President George W. Bush warned against equivocation amid the Israel-Gaza war while declaring that negotiating with killers is not an option. My view is one side is guilty and it's not Israel, Bush said at an event in California this week in video obtained by Axios and published Friday. Oh man, I didn't know he came to my state. Now I have to go vomit after I finish this. You're dealing with cold-blooded... Oh, let me do my voice for him. Dealing with cold-blooded killers, Bush said of Hamas in his first public remarks about the attack on Israel by the Palestinian militant group. You can make all kinds of excuses why they are, but they are. Bush, who oversaw the invasion of Afghanistan shortly after the 9/11 attacks and then the invasion of Iraq in 2003, said, going into the neighbors of Gaza is going to be tough, and said unexpected military action in this area will be ugly for a while. The former president said he expects that it's not going to take long before people start saying, it's gone on too long. Surely there's a way to settle this through negotiations. Both sides are guilty. Negotiating with killers is not an option, Bush stated, saying Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's job is to protect his country. More than 1,300 people were killed in Israel after Hamas launched an attack last Saturday, with the group also taking up to 150 people hostage, including some U.S. citizens. Israel has responded with a barrage of airstrikes, with Palestinian officials saying more than 1,500 Palestinians have been killed. Israel says that figure includes hundreds of Hamas fighters. Israel has called up about 360,000 reservists and is expected to launch a ground offensive in Gaza, warning residents of northern Gaza to evacuate Friday. Now, before I get into the furtherance of his remarks, I just want to kind of lay out a personal history here. Bush, during his first term, got with, I believe it was the United Nations, European Union, and Russia, and they devised what they called, or what he called, the roadmap for peace. And it was supposed to be this idealized version of a solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, where Palestinians would get their own separate state and they would just live peacefully around the Israelis. Now, this thing didn't go anywhere, but it's important to remember something like that, because a lot of these politicians, sometimes when they're running for office, but especially if they become president, they try so hard to pretend that they're neutral. Oh, you know, I want to see both sides get along together, but once they're retired, like Bush in this example, they're completely fine with going all in for Israel, which, like I said, is mostly due to the fact that AIPAC gives a lot of American politicians money to effectively pretend that the Israeli government is this darling angel democracy, the sole democracy in the Middle East, just trying to protect its civilians from the evil Palestinians. And of course, they'll smear anyone that criticizes them as being anti-Semitic, because that's their only defense for killing a bunch of innocent people. But to go to his comment, he says, my view is one side is guilty and it's not Israel. Okay, Hamas did something awful by attacking. I don't agree with it. No one who is interested in peace would condone what they did. But the thing Bush and a lot of the other American idiots that we call our politicians don't want to account for is that there is a broader context for that attack. Again, relating to the past treatment of Palestinians by the Israeli government. So, saying that one side is guilty and it's not Israel is not the right thing to say. Or what I think he should have said is, the Gaza attack, the attack by the Hamas is something I would never tolerate, but we need to understand that Israel's government is also not without having contributed to the climate that has caused for these types of groups to have become prevalent within that region. You're dealing with cold-blooded killers. You can make all kinds of excuses why they are, but they are. That's kind of interesting. I mean, first of all, to have the U.S. president who literally at Guantanamo Bay talking about cold-blooded killers is hilarious. Again, and the one who, let's not forget, started the longest American war out of any of them, talking about cold-blooded killers, is also comedic. I just find his commentary to be funny. It's people are going to say it's gone on too long. Surely there's a way to sell this through negotiations. Both sides are guilty. Well, I think both sides are culpable of doing things that have not helped their situation. I don't agree with Hamas attacking and killing innocent Israelis, but I also don't condone the Israeli government killing Palestinians year after year after year, and our crappy, bootlicking, shoe shining American politicians going around trying to wag their finger and tell people that if they don't support the Israeli government more than they support their own damn family or their own government, there's something wrong with them and they're anti-Semitic and all these other smears that don't actually address the problem. That's why I said you have to have some objectivity. You have to be able to treat this with a little bit of nuance, or else you're just going to sound like a complete stooge for one side or the other. Negotiating with killers is not an option. I'm telling you, man, sometimes when people, like, just thinking of him saying that, and I know there's probably a video of it. I don't want to watch him because I don't want to hear his voice, but it's so crazy to think about these governments, the United States government, the Israeli government, all these different governments that have killed via drone strikes and their never-ending forever wars, thousands and thousands of people. But they're going to tell you that negotiating with killers is not an option. Every time a country sits down to talk with the United States, they are negotiating with a killer. Maybe not that particular president, even though that's very rare. But our government has a lot of blood on its hands. So for it to sit here and do the whole, like, and the Israeli government does as well. But that's why when they sit here and they start talking about, we need to condemn violence. Yeah, you're a perpetrator of it. And I just think it's funny that these comments are coming from a guy who, when he was actually in a position of power, tried to play the even-handed angle. But in reality, was just jockeying to appear more moderate on this issue than he actually is, where he's a hard, bootlicking, just complete defender of Israel. It's kind of funny because I was thinking, this might end up coming up later if I do a documentary on him, but next year is going to be the centennial for George H.W. Bush, Bush's father, who I'll never forget during his last year in office blocked loan guarantees for the Israeli government to construct their own buildings like within that territory because he thought it wasn't something that would help the peace effort. So it's sad that his father had such at least enough courage to do something like that. But then the son, who had 2 terms as president, the most he could muster up is a peace idea that went nowhere, and now just completely shoe shining the Netanyahu's backside. It's really pathetic. But like I said, I expect nothing less from the worst U.S. president of the 21st century.